My name is Chelsea F. Jones, 34 years old. My mom pulled me aside and said, "Next week is just special. You being there would ruin that." My dad followed it up without hesitation, leaning back in his chair like he was delivering a verdict he'd already rehearsed. "You're too different now." I clinked my fork against my glass and nodded once. Duly noted. They planned it all without me. A dream vacation through Italy, Venice to Florence to Rome, booked down to the last detail. Luxury hotels, high-speed trains, private vineyard tours in Tuscany, dinner reservations at places you need connections just to get on the wait list. And they used my money to do it. Not a single mention of me. Not my name, not my daughter Ava's, not my son Luke's. Just my mom, my dad, my sister Melanie, her husband Josh, and their 2 kids. That was the family they had in mind, the one that mattered. I found out by accident. An email confirmation popped up in my inbox that wasn't meant for me. Melanie must have forwarded it without thinking. I stared at the itinerary, the names, the dates, rereading it over and over, waiting for my name to appear somewhere in the margins like an afterthought. It never did. It felt like someone punched me square in the chest. 6 months earlier, my mom had floated the idea during one of our usual Sunday dinners. She said she'd always dreamed of doing a big family trip and wanted the kids to experience Europe while they were still young. She mentioned that Melanie and Josh were strapped for cash and asked if I'd be willing to help cover the upfront costs. She said she'd settle it later. I said yes without hesitation. I'd just landed a major consulting contract and wanted to do something meaningful, something that would bring us closer. I paid for everything. Flights, hotels, rail passes, transfers, every single charge was in my name. And then they cut me out completely. I didn't confront them right away. I waited until Sunday dinner like nothing had happened. Mom served baked ziti. Dad talked about golf. Melanie smiled across the table like there wasn't already a knife lodged between my ribs. After dinner, I mentioned the trip casually. Italy sounds beautiful this time of year. Silence. That's when my mom pulled me aside and said next week was just special, and my presence would ruin it. My dad said I was too different now. No one disagreed. Not one of them spoke up. It felt rehearsed, like a quiet consensus had already been reached without me. I didn't argue. I didn't demand explanations. I took my kids home, helped them get ready for bed, kissed their foreheads, and waited until the house was quiet. Then I opened my laptop. Everything was still under my control. Every booking, every card, every access point. They hadn't even tried to move it out of my name. I reversed every charge one by one, froze the travel cards, locked the rail passes, canceled the airport transfers. Hotel reservations gone. I sat back and watched the whole thing collapse in silence. By the next morning, the first text came in. Then another. Then another. At check-in, they were denied everything. They didn't know yet that this was only the beginning. By 7:42 the next morning, the first text came through. It was from Josh, short and sharp, like a command instead of a question. "Unblock the account now." I stared at it while pouring cereal for Ava and Luke, the normalcy of the morning clashing hard with the panic buzzing on my phone. I replied with the only sentence that felt honest. "Sorry, I'm too different now." That opened the floodgates. Calls from my mom, emails from my dad, message after message stacking up faster than I bothered to read them. Melanie sent a screenshot of her daughter crying, framed like evidence in a trial, followed by a line about how cruel I was being. I didn't answer. They wanted this to turn into a confrontation, something loud and emotional they could point to later and say I'd lost control. I wasn't going to give them that. They still thought they could fix it. They showed up at JFK like nothing was wrong. First-class tickets printed, matching luggage sets rolling behind them. Josh even wore loafers with no socks, like he thought that made him European already. I only knew because Melanie posted it all on her Instagram story, champagne glasses clinking, the caption reading something about living la dolce vita. They had no idea yet. They thought I'd bluffed. I'd done more than reverse charges. I'd called every hotel and explained the situation, canceled the airport car in Rome, canceled the vineyard tour in Chianti, flagged the rail passes as stolen, changed the login details on the travel portal. I made sure there wasn't a single thread left to pull. By the time they reached the gate, the trip didn't exist anymore, not for them. I knew the exact moment it fell apart. Their flight was set to board at 6:40 p.m. At 6:12, my phone lit up again. Josh first. Why are we being denied boarding? Then Melanie. Did you cancel the flights? Then my mom, then my dad. A storm of missed calls I didn't answer. I imagined it clearly. The 6 of them standing there with stunned faces, kids tugging at sleeves, agents repeating the same calm sentence over and over. I could picture Melanie getting loud, Josh pretending to stay calm while clenching his jaw, my dad trying to assert authority like that still worked on strangers, and my mom standing there furious because someone finally told her no. While that was happening, I was at home helping Ava and Luke make pizza from scratch. Flour on the counter, sauce on their fingers, laughter filling the kitchen. They didn't know anything about Italy, or airports, or cancellations. They still thought Grandma and Grandpa had to postpone their trip because something came up. I wanted to keep it that way. Around 9, the tone of the messages changed. Josh accused me of acting psychotic and said I was hurting my own family. Melanie warned me that her kids would hear about this one day. I didn't respond. I let the silence stretch because silence was the only thing they didn't know how to argue with. Then my dad sent a message that almost made me laugh. You've embarrassed us. You've gone too far. I typed back one line. Hope it was still special. The next morning, I saw their car back in the driveway. 20 hours after takeoff, exhausted and defeated. They didn't call. They didn't knock. They went home to regroup, and that's when the second layer of this whole disaster began. At 3:47 that afternoon, the doorbell rang. It was my mom. No makeup, hair pulled back tight, her expression hovering somewhere between irritated and controlled. She didn't apologize. She didn't ask how I was. She said, "All right, you made your point." Then she launched into a lecture about how stunts like this drive wedges in families, how I needed to be more understanding, how it wasn't fair to ruin something they'd planned for so long, just because I felt excluded. Then she shifted gears like nothing had happened. Anyway, she said, I wanted to talk to you about the backyard. The contractor's still scheduled to start next month, and we don't want to lose the date. Your dad said you might be able to help cover the deposit. I looked at her and realized something chilling. She honestly believed I'd come around, that I'd throw a tantrum, make a scene at the airport, and then slide right back into my role. The check writer, the fixer, the one who always paid. I nodded slowly and told her I'd look at my accounts and get back to her by the end of the week. She smiled, relieved, and left like the crisis had passed. That was perfect, because now it was my turn to decide how this story moved forward, and they still had no idea how far I was willing to go. The quiet after my mom left wasn't relief. It was confirmation. They hadn't learned anything. In their minds, the airport disaster was a tantrum I'd thrown and already gotten out of my system. Now it was time for me to slide back into place, to smooth things over with money and pretend the wound wasn't still open. I didn't rush to respond. That was intentional. I let the silence sit for a day, then 2. I wanted them to feel the uncertainty, the way I had felt it reading that Italy itinerary, the way my name never appeared anywhere it should have. On Thursday afternoon, Melanie sent the first feeler. The message read like something you'd send a coworker you barely liked. Hey, Mom said you were thinking about helping with the backyard thing. Just let us know so we can confirm with the contractor. No warmth, no acknowledgement of what she'd done, just expectation. I left it unread for hours. When I finally replied, I kept it neutral. Still sorting some stuff out. I'll let you know soon. That one word, soon, did all the work. It gave them hope. It gave them something to plan around. It let them believe I was already halfway back. Friday came and went. By Saturday morning, my mom followed up, her message longer this time, more urgent. The contractor needed the deposit that day to hold the schedule. They were trying not to lose the fall install window. Could I confirm? I replied that I might be able to send half and needed to check with my bank. I didn't check anything. Saturday passed. Sunday passed. Monday morning, my dad called. I watched his name buzz on my screen and let it ring. A minute later, the text came. We're not trying to pressure you. Just need to know what's happening so we can plan. I texted back that I understood and should have an answer soon. And then I let that soon stretch again. By Wednesday afternoon, Melanie sent a voice memo. I didn't even listen to it. I just stared at the waveform on my screen, imagining her tone, the careful mix of fake concern and practiced patience. That night, I finally replied, telling her there was a small issue with a flagged transaction, but that I thought I could send the money by Friday. That was the hook. Friday came and passed without a word from me. Saturday morning, my dad sent a short message saying they told the contractor they'd handle it themselves. A separate text from my mom followed, softer this time. If you still want to pitch in later, every bit helps. I could feel the frustration behind the politeness, not because they were desperate for the money, but because I wasn't behaving the way I always had. I wasn't rescuing them. I wasn't smoothing the discomfort away. That night, Melanie sent a photo. Their backyard, patchy grass, a few white flags marking where a patio might have gone. She captioned it with something hopeful about still trying to make something happen before the weather turned. It was meant to tug at me, to remind me of all the times I'd stepped in before. I didn't respond. The space between us wasn't awkward anymore. It was growing on purpose. A week passed without a single message from any of them. No backyard updates, no Italy rescheduling talk, no passive-aggressive check-ins. Just nothing. It would have felt peaceful if I didn't know them so well. They weren't moving on. They were regrouping, waiting me out, trying to make me feel like I was the one who'd walked away. Then the story reached for a new audience. My cousin Erica texted me out of nowhere. "Hey, just checking in. Grandma's really upset about the Italy thing. You okay?" That stopped me cold. Grandma hadn't been mentioned once in all of this. She lived quietly, stayed out of drama, and always saw the best in everyone. I asked Erica what she meant. "Melanie told her you canceled the trip out of nowhere," she said. "She thinks you might be having some kind of breakdown." So that was the new version of events. I wasn't the daughter who paid and got excluded. I was the unstable one who sabotaged a wholesome family vacation. I called my grandmother immediately. She answered on the second ring, her voice gentle but worried. "Chelsea, what happened, honey?" I told her everything. Not angrily, not dramatically, just the facts. How they asked me to pay months ago, how they planned everything without me or my kids, how I found out by accident, how they told me my presence would ruin the trip. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said softly, "That's not what they told me." I told her I knew. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I don't know what's wrong with them." That was all I needed to hear. The fallout was immediate. My mom texted asking if I'd told Grandma a twisted version of events. Melanie accused me of making things worse and stressing an old woman. Josh chimed in, calling it toxic behavior and saying I was turning people against their own family. I read every message and felt something settle inside me. Not anger, not sadness, finality. I replied once, sending the same message to all 4 of them. Effective immediately, I'm stepping back from helping financially. No more vacations, no renovations, no loans. If I'm too different to be part of the family, then I'm too different to fund it. Best of luck with the backyard. I hit send and put my phone down. That night, no one replied. Not because they didn't see it, but because they finally understood I meant it. The silence after I sent that message was heavier than any argument we'd ever had. No explosions, no dramatic threats, no long paragraphs explaining why I was wrong. Just nothing. And that's how I knew it landed. When people lose leverage, they don't fight. They withdraw. Thanksgiving came quietly that year. No group text from my mom asking who was bringing what. No passive reminder from Melanie telling me to RSVP like she used to, always framed like a courtesy, but never actually optional. No forwarded message from my dad with a vague "let us know" tagged on the end. My phone stayed still, and I didn't pretend not to notice. The Wednesday before Thanksgiving, I opened Instagram out of habit and saw it all laid out for me. Melanie had gone full presentation mode. A long table set for 10, pumpkins lined down the center, handwritten name cards, napkins folded into perfect little fans. She captioned it, "Grateful for the real ones." Every chair was filled. Every plate had a name. None of them were mine. Not Chelsea, not Ava, not Luke. There wasn't even an empty chair tucked at the end for appearances. It wasn't forgetfulness. It was a decision, a clean one. They weren't just excluding me. They were erasing us. I didn't tell the kids. I didn't want them to feel like they'd been weighed and found unnecessary. We made our own dinner that night, not turkey. They voted for homemade mac and cheese and waffles, and we ate on the couch in our pajamas, watching old movies and laughing so hard I forgot what day it was for a while. That mattered more than any table setting ever could. A few days later, I ran into Erica in the grocery store parking lot. Same awkward half smile, the kind people wear when they know they're stepping into something delicate. She didn't bother pretending she didn't know. "They didn't invite you," she said quietly. "No," I replied. "First year." She nodded. Melanie told Grandma it was just simpler this way. Less tension. Less tension. That's what they called cutting me and my kids out completely. Like we were noise they could mute. Like the problem wasn't what they'd done to me, but how uncomfortable it made them to be reminded of it. Christmas came next, and I didn't even bother checking my phone. The only reason I saw anything was because a neighbor followed Melanie online and showed me a photo she'd posted. The whole family in matching pajamas sitting in front of the fireplace. 5 stockings hung neatly in a row. None with my kids' names. That one stung more than I expected. Not because I wanted to be there, but because of how deliberate it was. They weren't leaving space anymore. They weren't pretending this was temporary. They were closing ranks. The pain didn't last long. It turned into something colder and quieter. Distance. A kind of emotional silence I didn't know I was capable of. By January, I stopped checking my notifications altogether. I took Ava and Luke to Seattle for New Year's, just the 3 of us. We walked through Pike Place in the rain, rode the Ferris wheel, bought overpriced souvenirs, and stayed in a hotel with a fireplace that made them feel like we were somewhere magical. It wasn't traditional. It wasn't planned months in advance. It was real. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was missing anything. That year turned out to be my best financially. I landed 3 new clients, closed out a nightmare project I'd been dragging around for too long, and watched my accounts grow without anything leaking out to fix someone else's mess. I could have paid for their Italy trip twice over, could have finished their backyard and upgraded it, could have proven, once again, that I was generous enough to swallow anything. Instead, I installed a heated driveway at my own place and started planning a summer road trip with my kids. They stopped inviting me not because I changed, but because I stopped accepting their rules. Once the money was gone and nothing came with it, not silence, not forgiveness, not a smile. They didn't know how to treat me anymore, so they didn't. They cut me out to protect their comfort, and I stayed out to protect my peace. February came with a gray stillness that made everything feel slower, like the world was holding its breath. That was when the envelope arrived. Plain, no return address, just my name written across the front in my mom's handwriting. The letters looked shaky, uncertain, like she'd written them, erased them, and written them again before finally committing. I stood in the kitchen staring at it for a long moment. I could have tossed it straight into the trash. That would have been the cleanest choice. But curiosity won. It usually does when there's unfinished history involved. Inside was a folded letter and a check. The letter was short, 2 paragraphs. The first talked about repairing what was left, about how families make mistakes and how time gives perspective. The second explained that the check was my share of the Italy trip since I hadn't attended. A way to make things even, a way to close the loop. The check was for $3,600. I laughed. Not a bitter laugh, a real one. Because after everything, after exclusion, manipulation, rewriting the story, and cutting my children out of their lives, they still thought this was about money. Like reimbursing me would erase the fact that I was never invited in the first place. Like you could refund betrayal and call it reconciliation. I didn't cash it. I stuck it to the fridge with a magnet and let it sit there, staring at me every time I poured a glass of water or grabbed milk for the kids. It felt less like an offer and more like proof. Proof they still didn't get it. 3 days later, Josh texted me. Just 1 sentence. "We need to talk." I ignored it. Then Melanie texted, "Grandma's in the hospital. She asked for you." That one stopped me cold. I called the hospital to confirm it was true. Mild heart issue, nothing critical, but she had asked for me more than once. I drove up that afternoon. When I walked into her room, she smiled like nothing had changed, like we hadn't missed 2 holidays and a dozen family functions. We talked for an hour about books, weather, and the small, steady things she loved. Before I left, she squeezed my hand and said, "Don't let them write the ending without you." On the drive home, I stopped at a diner and sat in my car with a cup of coffee, staring out at nothing in particular. I thought about that check, about the fridge, about how many years I'd let other people decide the shape of my place in the family. That night, Melanie called again. This time I answered. She jumped right in, saying they wanted a reset. Not an apology, not really, but something close enough to pass as one. She said the kids were asking why they hadn't seen Ava and Luke in so long. She suggested we all get together soon. Keep things light. Then she mentioned that Mom and Dad were talking about selling the house. The money from the sale, she said, might go into a shared account for future family needs. Something forward-focused. Something we could all contribute to. I didn't respond. I just ended the call. The next morning, I took the check off the fridge, put it back in the envelope, and mailed it back without a note. No explanation, no argument. Just the check. That was the end. Not with shouting, not with slammed doors. Just silence. The kind that doesn't ask for permission. Since then, there have been no messages, no invitations, no attempts to pull me back in with guilt or nostalgia. The house sold, I heard through Erica. They moved to a smaller place outside the city. No one invited me to see it, and that was fine. I don't think they hate me. I think I scared them, because I didn't beg, I didn't punish, I didn't try to win. I just stepped away and didn't look back. They stopped having power the moment I stopped needing their approval. And for the first time in my life, that felt like peace.